Hello and welcome. This is Lights Out and away we go with the episode. With the Formula 1 podcast for fans and by fans. I'm Will, as I look across the digital garage. As always, I'm joined by my co-driver, shall I say my co-host Sam. Hello Sam, how are you?
Hello Will, hello listeners. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm all good, thank you. Yeah, can't complain. We're recording this midweek as I'm away when this is coming out. So thank you Sam, I should say, for accommodating my holiday schedule. But yeah, I'm all good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, not too bad. No, nothing as exciting as a holiday to look forward to, but I've had this week off, which has been very pleasant.
Very nice. And Arsenal have won.
Yeah, Arsenal keep winning. We've got the North London derby coming up, so that'll be a big one.
By the time this comes out, they'll either have won or lost. So do you want to say something general that can apply to either scenario?
I don't know. I don't think there are. No,
wasn't the game good? There you go.
Yeah, the game was great. Nothing that can go out pre-watershed. So yeah, no. I'm looking forward to Sunday. Actually, yeah, we've got the Japanese Grand Prix Sunday morning at very early start time. As you know, we've been discussing our respective alarm tactics to make sure we're up. And then yeah, the North London derby is in the afternoon. So I don't know if England. I think the rugby's might be Saturday night rather than Sunday.
Saturday,
but I feel like there's a big match on Sunday night. I think it's Wales Australia as well. Sunday night and the Rugby World Cup. So yeah, it's a good Sunday. Looks like it could be a very good day. Hopefully, a very good day of sport.
So when we next record our next live one after all this, we'll have to catch up and see how all that day of sport went. Did you win?
Yeah, well, this is it. Well, we'll be looking at this episode will come out after the Japanese Grand Prix review episode, won't it?
It will. So we'll have 2 weekends of reviewing.
Yeah. So if you're listening, yay! Or oh no.
There we go.
Both bases covered.
Very good. And when we last had a break in between races, we discussed greatest controversies, and we did plan to cover 2 controversies. We're going to cover Abu Dhabi 2021, which we covered in great detail, and I think we both really enjoyed that. And we've had a few people messages saying they really enjoyed that as well. So thank you very much for that feedback. But the second controversy, we just didn't get to it. We just ran out of time. But actually, it's nice because we can just devote its own little show to it, because it is a really mad controversy. I do think it's up there as one of the greatest ones ever. Just for how sort of political it all became and how crazy it all was for something in a small for a sport like Formula One. It's one of those things you think that would never happen in Formula One, and then it duly did happen. And that is the Singapore Grand Prix 2008, or as it's known, Crashgate. And yes, this is not about someone crashing into a gate. This is one of the most sort of infamous scandals in Formula One history. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set the scene. I'm going to take you back to 2008. I'm going to tell you what happened. Some of you may have heard this before. Others, this will be brand new. So let me re-jog your memory just in case you're a bit hazy on the details. So it's 2008. Formula One is going to Singapore quite late into the season for its first ever night race. Big thing for Formula One to see the cars at night, see the eyes and the drivers, because with the colours and the darkness, you get to see it a completely different way. And in this season, Lewis Hamilton is picking himself back up off having missed out on the last World Championship in his debut season, and he's going against Felipe Massa, who is racing for Ferrari. And it's a pretty tight battle for the title throughout the 2008 season. And Fernando Alonso, having been Lewis's teammate at McLaren the year before, moves to Renault, kind of fell out with Hamilton and thought the team were favouring Hamilton over him. Kind of didn't go very well. Obviously got outshone by a rookie in Hamilton. So he moves to Renault, a team he's been only a couple of years before, where he won 2 world championships. And he partners Nelson Piquet Jr. Now, Nelson Piquet Jr. is the son of Nelson Piquet, who is a 2-time world champion.
Correct.
2-time world champion.
Yep.
Very successful Brazilian driver. And his son was a rookie in the sport. So quite a big thing for his son to be coming into the sport. And, this is the return of Renault, I think, fully back into the sport, having taken a bit of a hiatus. And this season back in the sport as a big manufacturer in 2008 was not going very well. They weren't competing for wins. They weren't competing for the World Championship at all. Weren't really even on the podium. And they were competing with Toyota, who were the other big sort of car manufacturer at the time. And yeah, I think they found it quite tough coming in and not going to plan. Anyway, we get to Singapore Grand Prix qualifying. Alonso qualifies 15th due to mechanical failure. Nelson Piquet qualifies 16th. Now, the race starts, and this is the era of refueling. And Alonso only fueled his car up with 12, I think it was about 12 or 13 laps of fuel, which
Yep.
really surprised people because for someone so far back in the grid, the common thing was to be really heavy load and try to do like a one stop, so you only have to refuel once. But he only fueled up for about, I think, 13, 14 laps, but pitted for fuel and tyres on lap 12, and he rejoined the race at the very back of the grid. And like I said, people were quite confused by this, caught people by surprise. And then 3 laps later, his teammate Nelson Piquet Jr. hits the circuit wall at turn 17, and it was quite a big crash. Debris everywhere. The car is, right off. It's not making it back to the pit lane, and it's one of the only parts of the circuit where there was not a crane nearby. So it meant they had to deploy the safety car to help clear it up. But at this point, I think in the regulations you couldn't pit when the safety car was out, so a lot of people couldn't take that advantage of a reduced pit time as they can do now. So loads of people were still out, and Alonso was still there. And then they all pit not long after the safety car goes back in, and Alonso starts to climb up the grid because he's already pitted. And Felipe Massa, when he pits, they're refueling the car, and then something goes kind of wrong. I don't know what fully happened, but he basically
the hose got stuck.
He got stuck,
and then he
drives
drove
off, doesn't he?
Yeah, dragging the hose down the pit lane and fuel going everywhere. Yeah, it was incredibly dangerous.
It was. I'm surprised it didn't catch light because that could have caused damage to quite a few teams. So the race leader Massa out of the race because they couldn't get the hose off, and obviously causes damage. And so Alonso somehow finds himself, well, you probably figure out how, he's then at the front of the grid, ends up winning the race, and he's joined on the podium by Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. And at the time, where the result, a few people thought it was a bit odd that he sort of randomly come from so far behind to end up winning a race in a season when they'd been out of kilter. And obviously people, I think, raised a few eyebrows his really early stint, which was not common for people at the back. So, we go to the end of the season, and Hamilton beats Massa by a handful of points at the final race in basically the final corner to be world champion. Fast forward to halfway through the 2009 season, and Nelson Piquet Jr. Had been Alonso's partner in the team for that start of that season. But halfway through the season, he gets sacked for not a really great performance, and is replaced by a fellow Frenchman. Oh, not a fellow Frenchman, a Frenchman called Romain Grosjean, who we all know very well. Who is kind of ironic to be replaced by someone that went on to be well known for just causing multiple crashes. And then it's about a week after being sacked from Renault, Piquet goes to the FIA and tells them that the crash that he had in Singapore was planned, and it was deliberate, and that it was Pat Simmons who was the technical director of Renault at the time. So the FIA immediately have to launch an investigation to find out what's going on, and there's quite a lot of leaks that come out of the FIA and the Renault team, and the Renault team come out and claim it's a blackmail attempt from Nelson Piquet to get him back into the team, and then they sort of suggest it was actually Piquet's idea to sort of get a win for the team. And so the FIA are sort of in the background investigating. This is all happening over like a month or two, and then out of nowhere, Renault come out and admit to it being a deliberate crash, and that's just before the FIA finds them guilty, which obviously they probably did with that statement. And so they get a 2-year suspended sentence where if they make any breaches of the rules, they get kicked out of the sport. And Pat Simmons got a ban for Formula One, and Flavio Briatore, the quite eccentric team principal, also gets a lifetime ban from Formula One. And Pat Simmons, he actually collaborated and cooperates with the FIA with their investigation, so he actually only got a 5-year suspended, 5-year penalty sort of sentence banning him from the sport. And then, interestingly, Fernando Alonso was cleared of any involvement, which we'll come on to. And yeah, he it's claimed that he knew nothing about it at all. Piquet wasn't aware of the plot. But we'll debate that in a minute.
Mm.
And Nelson Piquet never returns to the sport. Doesn't manage to find a way back into the sport. Probably you're not if you try and destroy your own team like that and cause so much damage. And then Renault, they lose some really big sponsors as well. So I think it was ING Bank were a major sponsor of them. They pulled out because of the controversy about this. And yeah, it was quite a damning episode for Formula One, and quite extraordinary to see someone, deliberately crash a race to fix it. It's like match fixing, really, but to be so obvious and so odd, it's just quite surreal to see. Now, you think that's probably story over. Let's get into the meat of it. Let's analyze it. But actually, there's a very relevant and very topical update I need to give you about this. You may have seen this, but Felipe Massa, who missed out on the World Championship, is currently taking legal action against the FIA because he claims at the time he was told by Bernie Ecclestone, who used to own the sport, and Max Mosley, who was the chief in charge of the FIA, that they knew that it was they kind of knew it was something wrong at the time, but they didn't deal with it. And so I think what Massa is trying to do is trying to get the race scrubbed from that season, because at the time, Alonso, despite all this investigation and Renault being found guilty, Alonso kept the points of the race win and it wasn't void. And if it had been voided, Massa would have won the World Championship. So Massa's now trying to get that World Championship credited to him. And he's been, trying to raise quite a bit of profile from him. He's got quite a big legal team, I think, trying to help him. And he's trying to get Lewis Hamilton to collaborate and help his case, which I don't see why Lewis would want to do that. Why would he want to lose a World Championship? And I think Lewis has said, yeah, I've got no interest in being involved. But it does open up I think it was at the Singapore Grand Prix this season, Toto Wolff said they are watching it very closely what happens. So it wouldn't surprise me if Massa is successful, then maybe you might see.
He won't be.
No, I don't think he will.
Surely,
if he is, Mercedes might be lining up and getting Lewis his 2021 title. Now, Sam, before I ask you some several questions about this, I want to get your take. What do you remember of it, and what's your views on Crashgate?
What do I don't remember. I mean, I was only 17 at the time when it happened, and I remember it happening, and I do remember there being some chat about it being weird. Like I remember some of the post-race analysis and discussions and stuff, because this was all happening before the sport had moved to Sky Sport, so all of this was still done on the Beeb. And I think back then, because of the nature of the sport, it wasn't as big as it is now. Like it didn't have the following, obviously, way before Netflix and all the rest of it. I think journalists and people who were kind of analysing the sport were a bit more bullish about stuff and were a bit more, I don't know, took more risks, let's say, with some of the stuff that was going on. And this was also an era of lots of other controversies and things going on too. So they probably felt emboldened to be a bit like that. So I do remember there being some chat after the race that was just a bit weird. It all felt incredibly convenient. Like it did play out just perfectly, like way too perfectly for Alonso. And as you say, the strategy itself is just weird. Particularly on a track where it's really difficult to overtake. Why would you fuel a car for only 12 laps and have them whilst they're qualifying right at the back of the grid? You're basically saying in that situation, our expectation is that our driver is going to make his way through the field quickly. We'll get the pit stop done early, and then he'll carry on from whatever position he's got to after that point. So it was just a bit of a weird strategy. And then, yeah, for the events to play out like they did, and obviously the point you make there about the pit lane is really important. Like what we have now is not what we had in 2008. You couldn't come in during a pit lane, during a safety car. And it's just absolutely perfect, right? Alonso comes in, gets a fresh set of tyres, fuels to the end of the race. In the current system that we have now, he'd be pooling around right at the back of the grid, and if there was a safety car, he'd be even further behind everybody else because they'd all take advantage of the safety car and lose less race time pitting. Whereas in this situation, the crash happens, they all get to follow the safety car around for ages. They can't come into the pits, and Alonso catches right up to the pack, and then they all have to come in, and he's left, having a lovely old time working his way up to winning the race. So it did all just play out way too perfectly. I mean, in a way, I'm surprised that. Particularly the way things are now, where like teams often send people down to the FIA to complain about this, that, and the other. I'm kind of surprised that it wasn't more I guess, suspicion and investigation and suggestions that something suspicious had happened. I don't for example, now I feel like if the same thing happened again or something similar happened now, everyone would be on it straight away. They'd be all over it, and the stewards would be being asked questions right at the end of the race, probably, or during the race. So, yeah, it was a bit weird that it took so long to happen. And then, what happened with Piquet in 2009, in fact, and the way it all came out, it's just such classic Renault behavior. Like, there's a fallout with a driver because their performance is poor. Then they decide that's the prime opportunity to stick the knife into the team that's just sacked them and basically come clean about all of the stuff that they did in 2008 to try and to engineer a race victory. It was a total mess. And it was I don't think it's as big a stain on the sport as some other controversies and scandals like the one we spoke about last time, or some others as well, like Spygate and things, because it did just involve one team in one race taking actions to try and change the course of a Grand Prix and win one. It is like blatant brazen cheating, which is obviously rubbish and not great for the sport at all. But it's a bit easier to compartmentalize it when it's like that. It wasn't great that like the response that followed wasn't ideal, and the way the FIA handled it, just took ages and stuff. But at least afterwards, it felt like a reasonable amount, a reasonable punishment had been imposed, and the senior people had been removed and stuff. And we'll get to Alonso, I'm sure, in a moment. And all the right people seemingly kind of got kicked out of the sport, and we haven't seen anything like it happen since. So I suppose you could argue that they handled it relatively well. But the incident itself in the race, I do remember watching the race, but I don't remember feeling immediately at the time, oh, that's really weird. I don't think I had that kind of strategic view of the sport at all. And as I said, like, there was a bit of chat about it with some of the journos and stuff. I seem to remember people being like, oh, it's worked out really conveniently having it for you along, Fernando, hasn't it, kind of thing. But nothing more than that. So it is a really interesting one. It's quite unique, I think, to get something that's just so like fixed, like a fixed point within a race, and that being the kind of scandal or the whole center for something that then followed on for like 2 years, basically.
Yeah. I was when I was reading up, apparently the main journalist that sort of called Sasson at the time, who thought it was really odd, was Martin Brundle, which I think is really interesting. That one, probably the best commentator out there, one of the best Formula 1 journalists out there, had that sort of feeling that, this doesn't feel quite right. I think I agree with everything you say.
So the ones that raised an eyebrow were the drivers, as always.
That's a good point.
Because they just know, right? Like they're all in the same headspace. They're all in it to try and win races, and they all have to think quite strategically about how to do things. And there are more cerebral drivers than others, but generally speaking, they are all very switched on, quite tactical, strategic people anyway. And Martin Brundle, of course, I'm sure he is the perfect pundit, I think, generally speaking, apart from Ted Kravitz, obviously. But because he's been in that situation, he's raced against someone like Senna as well, like just almost the perfect racing driver, right? So that it was quite interesting that it's the drivers that are, as always, I think in my mind anyway, a pretty good barometer for things in general.
And why do you think Renault did it? Why did they think, it seems quite an extraordinary and desperate measure to get to at a time when they didn't, it wasn't like they were going for a world championship, but they need to, fix a race. What do you think? Do you think it was just, let's chance it and get ourselves a bit of good publicity? What's your views on why they did it?
So two reasons. So one, I think they spotted an opportunity. They saw in the rules and the way that they were constructed an opportunity for this kind of thing to happen naturally, and probably thought they could get away with it. Because it is the kind of thing that, like, if it does happen naturally, you would still look at it and think, well, that's a bit weird. Like, well, that's been very fortunate. But it's the fact that it's the way they fueled the car, right? That was the dead giveaway. Like, if Alonso had been fueled with hard tires to go 40 laps and the same thing had happened, I don't think anyone would have batted an eyelid. Like, Renault really messed that up, I think. Like, if they're going to cheat properly. Like, don't do it in such an obvious way. So I think, there's definitely a kind of, they spotted an opportunity to do it. But I actually think Alonso's a massive factor in this. Like, he is an incredibly demanding. No, we won't get to whether or not he knew or he didn't. We'll get to that in a moment. That's not what I'm commenting on. I'm commenting at the moment on the fact that he is an
competitive.
incredibly driven,
And
competitive.
Briatore as well.
Yeah.
Briatore was the team principal at Benetton, but that really didn't he bring Michael Schumacher to the team after Michael Schumacher did
Yeah.
one race at Jordan? He just spotted he was a talent and was desperate to win. Then Schumacher wins his first world championships with them.
Yeah, of course, and there's a lot of factors here. So Alonso is obviously a former world champion, desperate to win another one. He's just off the back of a season where he's been embarrassed by a rookie. That same rookie is also challenging for a world championship in this year, in 2008, in the team he's just left. I should imagine Alonso was difficult to manage that season. He was in a car he wasn't happy with. It wasn't winning races, wasn't challenging for titles, and his nemesis, for want of a better phrase, was at McLaren having a whale of a time, on course to win a world championship the year he left. So I think those two factors combined probably meant Renault felt, why not? Let's have a go. But they cheated badly.
Yeah, but also it's a one-time move, right? You can't do that,
Yeah.
2 weeks later at the next race. You can only play that move once, and why not wait till if you've got the idea of that? Why not do it when it's a really key moment? I mean, I find it very interesting that both sides sort of pointed the finger at each other. Nelson Piquet said it was Pat Simmons' idea. Pat Simmons says it was Nelson Piquet's idea. And I think it tells you a lot that Pat Simmons then went on to work for Formula One to help bring the new technical regulations. Like that tells me that it probably wasn't Pat Simmons' idea, because why would Formula One trust or work with someone like that if it was their idea to fix a race? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I look at the roster of people who've worked for the FIA, and there are quite a few, to be fair, that have come from teams that have done some pretty sus things down the years. Like, there's quite a few people from Ferrari, and they haven't been whiter than white, let's say, the last 20 years either. So, yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily it. I mean, the genesis of it, I don't really care about, to be honest. Like, who came up with this great idea? I don't really care. It's more who knew about it and who went along with it, because anybody could have that idea. Like, if you and I are in that team, we probably look at that rule set as, like, say we're working in strategy, we probably look at the look at the rule set at the start of the year and think, oh, there are a few races where if we have if there's a crash conveniently timed, we could put our driver in a position to win the race. And talking about Singapore, Monaco, and maybe a couple of others back then, because there weren't a huge number of street races, and those are the two where it's toughest to overtake. So it's the best place to do that kind of thing. But you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't, even if we suggested it, I would expect to be absolutely yelled at by anyone who's in any position of power, saying, "No, we're not going to cheat our way to a win just because you've spotted a little, loop, well, not even a loophole, but you've spotted a way in which to make the rules work for us at a couple of races this year." It's more, who went along with it that I'm interested in, and that's probably where the discussion about Alonso gets interesting, because I struggle to believe that someone like him would agree to get into a car with 12 laps of fuel at the back of the grid without knowing that there was going to be something happening that would shape and benefit his race.
Yeah,
because it's just such a rogue strategy, and he is such a switched-on driver, right? Like, we've seen him before. He is incredibly bright, and his strategic brain behind the wheel is up there, right? One of the best in the sport, for sure. And for him to have gotten into a car with 12 laps of fuel in the position he was on the grid, I don't know. It's hard to believe that would happen without him knowing something, because otherwise it'd just be weird. He'd be on the radio just being like, what is the strategy? Whose idea was this?
Yeah, to be in so much earlier than everyone else. Like, he was pitted way earlier, even before the safety car 2 laps later.
Yeah,
he was in way before anyone else was planning to come in, which is just bizarre for someone like, say, the back grid. Either they came up with a really good idea and said, I wonder if they said to him, like, oh, what we'll underfuel you and we'll pit you early just in case there's a crash. Let's say there's a crash in lap 14. We'll underfuel it. So, like, maybe they just speculated with him, like, oh, let's just back ourselves here, and like just chance it. But again, I don't know. Knowing Alonso, I feel like he must have known. And there's two sort of giveaways, I think, for me. One is his manager at the time, and is always been very close to, is Flavio Briatore, who was the team principal. Yep. So would Flavio Briatore not tell the person he's very close to, oh, by the way, we're cooking this up, you're going to win a race from this?
Yeah.
Or would he be like, no, actually, I'm just going to protect you, I'm not going to tell you what's going on? I think the former rather than the latter. And then the second thing is there was an interview about a year later at the Singapore Grand Prix when after all this was coming out, when Ted was asking Alonso about it. And I've seen this clip, and Alonso has the grin of a Cheshire cat about it. He's like, well, I won the race, and it's a very mischievous smile, and the way he answers the question is very sort of like knowing. I think that's him slipping a little bit there and like revealing that maybe he did know, but they just decided at the time when it all kicked off that they were just going to deny that because they didn't want it to affect him and his reputation. And to be fair to him, it's never really, it's not affected his reputation at all. Whereas,
No.
Nelson Piquet became unemployable. It's not really, when you think of Alonso, you don't even really think of Crashgate as a thing that you associate with him. You think of his world championships, his stroppy behaviour, his failure at Ferrari. You don't really think of him as being involved or part of Crashgate.
But he's probably the only driver I could think, certainly on the grid at the moment, who really revels in being the kind of anti-hero sort of character. And I do wonder if part of that's from a place of having done some pretty dodgy things down the years. And he has done some other stuff as well. I mean, the stories about him, with the mechanics and stuff at McLaren and paying slipping the money or whatever.
He got scotch-free, didn't he, after Spygate?
Yeah.
And he tried to throw Lewis under the bus during that whole Spygate, which is a whole different scandal. But
he's, of all the drivers on the grid, he's historically been the one who's seemingly been willing to sort of push the boundaries of what's acceptable. Not so much on the track, but definitely off it.
He did kill a lizard,
and he is the lizard slayer forevermore. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. We'll never really know. I don't know. I mean, maybe Alonso one day will write a book and he'll tell everyone he knew about it and just lol his way all the way to retirement, kind of thing. But it doesn't seem hugely likely. But equally, I really struggle to believe for someone like if he was like a rookie driver or someone really young in the sport, or even someone that's just like not super bothered about strategy. Like if it's like a Charles Leclerc kind of character, they're not really switched on that way. Like their intent is to drive the car as quickly as possible at all times. Like they don't really think so much about strategy. Like they have to be told. They're not quite, in the opposite way to like a Sainz, for example. You think strategically about a race all the time. Alonso's much more like that, and I really struggle to think or to believe that a driver that's so switched on in that way, who had won world championships, serial race winner, really experienced, would have accepted getting in the car with that strategy up front. Because it's just so counterintuitive.
But also, it's also like a really stupid move by it's a risk that's not really worth taking, is it? Yes, they may have won one race, but the fact it then got exposed by them sacking Piquet, they had to trust at the time that Piquet would never go, and they obviously didn't have that good a relationship for him to come like a week after being sacked to run to the FIA and tell them. It's a really stupid thing because it basically really really screwed over the Formula One team because they lost their key sponsors. And I think as I said, ING, they were their title sponsor at the time. They were struggling really badly with the financial crisis that was going around the world. But then this happens, and they get like sort of a perfect get out of contract clause by sort of saying, well, this is you've made irretrievable sort of brand damage to us. So they get out of their contract. Like the Renault team really struggled for that period because remember then when Lotus came in, they had to use sort of the Lotus Renault, they had to use that branding for a while, and then they had a lot of Russian sponsorship at one point as well. And then they only sort of stabilized as Renault when it was the black and yellow with Hulkenberg and Sainz, and then with Danny Rick. Just crazy for a major manufacturer for that brand association and for them to be associated with it. Like it's just, I don't know. It wasn't like they were doing it when they were competing for a world championship. They were doing it when they were very much a mid-table team.
Very odd. Yeah, it wasn't really. It didn't look like, or it doesn't seem to have been a particularly long-term plan, does it? Really? They just saw an opportunity and made the wrong decision, I think, or some people made the wrong decision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And bringing it back to the present day, do you think you've sort of alluded already? But do you think we should be concerned if Massa wins his legal case?
I don't think so. Mostly because the fuel hose got stuck. Like Like,
Mm.
it doesn't matter when the pit stop happens. The fuel hose was faulty. It got stuck. He was taken out of the race by it. I don't subscribe to the view that if the crash doesn't happen when Ferrari bring him in, the pit stop goes perfectly. Massa comes out and he's fine. Also, Hamilton drove a really good race, finished on the podium. Like there were other factors at play within that Grand Prix beyond Renault's shenanigans, and if you void the entire result, it's the same for the entirety of the grid. All of those teams and drivers lose those points and stuff, and it's just not. I don't think that's right. And there's only one. What is it? Voiding the race altogether is the only outcome in which the championship would change destination, right? If they just removed Alonso and Piquet from the race results, Hamilton would win Hamilton still wins.
Which probably feels more likely because you'd probably disqualify those that cheated or were associated with the cheating or benefited from the cheating, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, he'll probably push to say, if it wasn't for the safety car, I wouldn't have pit when I did, and I probably wouldn't have had this fuel hose issue.
Yeah.
But then that feels very, I'm not a legal expert, but that feels very much, that seems very speculative, where it probably feels like it's an easier case to, like, if anything's going to happen, they'll either just wipe out Alonso from the result and then the points just get readjusted.
Yeah, let's put it this way. If Massa runs over a load of debris from Piquet's car and that causes him loads of problems, breaks the car and he gets taken out of the race that way, I'm sort of open to a conversation about it. But that isn't what happened. Like, the issue that happened was, for him, was the pit stop went wrong. And that was totally outside of any influence from what Renault were up to on the track.
Yeah, I think as well, I'm just thinking about it as well, like, if he is successful, I just think it would get very, very messy for a number of reasons, because the history of the sport will then get wrapped up in the legal and into what happened legally and what happened in the courts. So you can't look back on that period of that time and think, well, that's how it actually happened. You got to go, well, actually, if you got to go back to the court ruling of 2023 when they said X, Y, and Z, like, that becomes very messy. You're probably going to get people like Hamilton counter-suing or counter-appealing that, saying, why should, that's not fair. We should go for the other scenario. And then, like I said, it probably brings up a scenario of where, probably unlikely, but if Massa absolutely walks that court and gets exactly what he wants and gets his world title, does that then mean Hamilton will then be really open to the idea of taking Red Bull? And then that becomes messy, because it's another scandal that then gets taken to the court, and then it'd be a real shame, because at the time I remember that so clearly, that 2008, that final race, Massa crosses the line, and his team and his family think they've won the World Championship, and then one Ferrari mechanic realizes that actually Hamilton is on the move, and then you get that iconic image of, well, two iconic images of Hamilton passing Glock on the final corner to become World Championship, and then you also get the iconic image of Massa winning his home race, bawling his eyes out in the dark and in the rain, having just lost the World Championship. Like, and if that got scrubbed out, I'd actually feel really gutted, because that's an iconic moment in Formula One history that's just not relevant. It doesn't count anymore because, of something happening that, wasn't known at the time and, wasn't considered at the time. That just seems unfair on that, as fans and on the history of the sport, to suddenly rewrite it. And I feel like that'd be a real shame if Formula One did like that. It almost be a bit like, what's going to happen probably with Manchester City. Like, they're being investigated at the moment for financial doping. Like, if they suddenly get ripped out of the sport and all those previous Premier Leagues get re-awarded to other people and stuff like that,
fingers crossed.
Well, yeah, we say fingers crossed, but again, that will make an absolute mockery of the last 10 years of football, right? Because you'd be like, well, none of it actually really mattered or counted, because it's all just been rewritten because of a legal ruling. Like, I don't know. Me personally, I don't particularly like the idea of history being rewritten because of that. It just seems like, I don't know. What do you think?
No, neither do I. I mean, I don't. Well, as we said before, when we talked about Abu Dhabi, I don't think Lewis or Mercedes would want to win a world championship in the courtroom in the same way that no Premier League team, I'm sure, would want to win a title. Well, in Arsenal's case, a year later, or Liverpool's case many years later, Man United's case quite a few years later as well. Like, it's not, no one wants that. I think we're talking about slightly different things. I mean, the Manchester City thing, I think it's like a systemic, potentially, allegedly, we'll see what happens kind of vibe. Of course, don't want to get Man City's lawyers on us for the podcast. We'll be over
covered as well.
We'll be put out very quick. We'll be deleted from all platforms very quickly. So the allegedly, sports doping that Manchester City have engaged with for the last 15 years. It's like a systemic level of cheating. Like, we're talking in this case about one incident in one race that was engineered by one team to win one Grand Prix. And I feel like the legal case, I think, will be thrown out pretty quickly, because like there are really there's only two questions really you need to ask Ferrari and Massa. And the first one is, did the crash materially change the nature of your pit stop? Yes or no? And I think the answer to that is probably no. And the second is, what on earth does Nelson Piquet crashing into the wall have to do with your pit hose breaking? The pit hose was broken. Like, it doesn't change. It could have happened on lap 30. When they plan to come in, it doesn't make a difference for my money. So, yeah, I think I'd be really surprised. Also, if you do that kind of thing, like, I'm pretty sure Hamilton and his team will suddenly look at some of the events from the 2008 season and think, well, I got shunted off in whatever Grand Prix.
Yeah,
I was at the mercy of one specific incident or one specific mistake that was probably against the rules, like, breaking racing rules or whatever, that wasn't properly punished. And like, there's a whole,
yeah.
I don't know. It's just, it becomes quite difficult. And again, I think Abu Dhabi is a slightly different case, because we're talking about the regulator of the sport and the people running the sport making decisions that weren't concurrent with the rule set themselves. Whereas in this case, it's one team, naughty shenanigans to win one race, and I don't see the material impact on the championship in the same way that probably Massa and his legal team do, personally. And there are other things that happen in that season that cost Massa as well beyond what happened in Singapore.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what just sort of what Massa was claiming, and he apparently, this is, classic Bernie Ecclestone. Since he's left F1, he's like a really clumsy into saying, "Oh yeah, they knew in 2008 that it was like, that it was all fixed and it was all planned." Which is, then that's just like, if the organisers like know that, then that's massively on them, and it's massive like negligence on the sport, right, and the running of the sport. But apparently, the reason why one of the reasons why they think nothing's going to happen is because once the World Championship trophy is given out at the end of the season, the end of season awards, like, that marks the very end. I think there's a rule that says that World Championship ranking is untouchable after that award ceremony at the end of the year. So he's like, they can't then now go and unpick that, can they? If that's what the ruling used to say, I don't know. But it'll be very interesting to see what happens with Felipe Massa. Kind of, if he pursues it relentlessly, I think he'd really, really damage his reputation in Formula One, because he'll become known as the guy that tried to like win a World Championship in court, rather than the really talented Brazilian driver that just got unlucky, which it was. Like I say, it's unlucky. For all the time it's happened, when you're going for a World Championship battle and you have someone cheat like that in a race, in a way that we've never seen before and we've never seen since, is just unlucky, and sometimes you just got to accept it, I think. But I think it's probably one of the greatest or the biggest instance of cheating in Formula One history, and I wonder if we'll ever see anything similar to it again, because I thought it was quite funny at the Singapore Grand Prix when Stroll crashed. There was a lot of memes go around of Alonso saying to him, like, "You've crashed on the wrong day," sort of, which I did think was quite a good chat. But yeah, I'd be surprised if we see something again. Although, when you said we'd never seen anything like it before, it did remind me of. Do you remember the Zandvoort Grand Prix last season where Max and Lewis were jostling for the lead, and Lewis, I think, was in the lead at the time, or it was close for jostling for the lead. And do you remember when AlphaTauri pitted Yuki and he had damage or something, and then they released him, and then he stopped literally like 200 meters later?
Oh yeah,
and everyone's been like, not sure about that. Like, I don't know. Could that have been something, a bit of collusion to try and fight? As there's probably some Formula One fans out there that probably think that was Red Bull family working to make sure Max won his home race. I don't know. Maybe that can be our Sam and Will investigate series, like what was going on. Let's start tapping up some former AlphaTauri employees. If Yuki Tsunoda gets sacked, let's start tapping up tapping him up to see if he come on the podcast reveal whether he was told to go back out, even though they knew they were going to stop.
I can't for one second believe Yuki would go along with anything like that.
No, neither. I think he'd just start screaming on the radio exactly what's happening. He'd be too emotional to sort of keep it in check, right?
Yeah, his rage is too pure when the car breaks down. I can't imagine, because otherwise he'd be like, oh no, the car's breaking down into the pit lane as planned. No, I don't buy that. Yeah. And also, it's not like Red Bull needed that, really. I mean, yes, okay, fine, Max home Grand Prix and the rest of it, but still smashing it at the time, so probably would have been fine. But anyway,
yeah. Well, sad to crazy thing that happens in sport. And I was going to say, it's been a rough couple of years for the Piquet family, because not only did Nelson Piquet Jr. basically get dropped by everyone and didn't come back into the sport, his dad Nelson Piquet massively ruined his reputation by making racist comments about Lewis Hamilton, and he had to pay a massive fine recently, which was good on Lewis and Brazil's legal system for calling him out on that, because that was absolutely disgusting. Yep. So poor the Piquets. Just a quick one. I don't really know Nelson Piquet Senior as an F1 driver. What's your knowledge of him? Was he a great driver?
He was very good. Yeah, he was really good. So he was in the. Do you remember the famous photo of Senna?
Oh yeah,
Prost, Piquet, and Mansell after Mansell won his World Championship in '94. I think it was '94. Yeah. There's a really famous photo of them all sat up on the barricade, and Piquet was in that club. He was really well thought of. He won 2 championships, and it's funny, he's come up a couple of times now, actually, the last few weeks. Nelson Piquet, firstly, because do you remember when we talked about Charlie Whiting in the underrated
yes,
kind of unsung heroes episode? Charlie Whiting was his race engineer for those 2 years that he won the World Championship.
Right.
So there's quite a fun connection there. And then he came up again when I watched Red 5, which is the Nigel Mansell documentary on Sky.
I need to watch that.
Yeah, it's really good. And Nelson Piquet was in that a little bit. I mean, he wasn't. I don't think he spoke in the documentary, but there are obviously lots of pictures of him and videos of him racing and stuff. And then that iconic picture he appears in. So he was a very, very talented Formula 1 driver. I don't think he was ever in the same stratosphere, let's say, as a Senna, but he was a very, very solid Grand Prix driver. Double world champion. I think he won 2. I don't think he won 3. I think I'm right in thinking he won 2.
Let me give it a quick Google for you.
It was in the 80s. I think he won like 83, 85 maybe, or something like that.
It must be rough for him and also for his son. Like, your dad's a world champion, a double world champion, and then your son is associated with cheating in a race. Yeah,
it wasn't great. Well, he never really fulfilled the potential, did he, Piquet Jr.? Yeah. There was a lot of, as we've seen same with Mick Schumacher and others, like it's not easy to carry that family name, I think, into the sport, particularly when you're following in the footsteps of people who have sort of completed the sport and won world championships and stuff. Was it 84, 87, 85, 87 that he won them?
Close. He's won 3. 81, 83, 87.
Okay. Oh, yeah, there you go. So, triple world champion. Very good.
Yeah, well, there we go.
That's funny they're all spaced out like that.
Yeah.
All through the 80s. I suppose just interspersed with Senna and Prost through that period.
Yeah, very good.
All right.
Well, I think that concludes our chat on Crashgate. Hope you enjoyed that. We covered our predictions in our last episode, in the Japan episode, so you'll have to listen to the Qatar episode to hear our recap of how we've gotten in Qatar. But yeah.
Thanks very much for joining us. Remember to subscribe and leave a review on your podcast platform of choice. If you enjoyed it, why don't you share it with a friend? Hopefully they enjoy it more than Felipe Massa enjoyed his Thierry celebration winning the Brazilian Grand Prix at the end of 2008. That feels a bit cheap. I feel
You've got to get in there.
That.
You've got to get in there.
I did feel bad for him. He was desperately unlucky, but Lewis was brilliant that season as well, to be fair. Follow us on Twitter at LightsOutLads, and on Instagram we are at LightsOutPod. We've got a new race coming up. Well, it's weird saying that Japanese Grand Prix, but yes.
Yeah, we're off to... So we went to Qatar in 2021, and I think it's the same circuit. They were going to build a new circuit, but I think that's been delayed. And we didn't go last year because it was going to basically overwhelm Qatar because of the World Cup being at the same time. Because I remember the year before, it was like Beckham was there and a lot of other players there, and they had the World Cup trophy as well. But yeah, I think I think they've modified the circuit a little bit. But it's quite a quick, from my experience of playing the Formula One game. It's it's a very quick circuit, and it's a sprint race as well, so that'll be good fun.
Okay.
Hopefully have a crazy one to spice things up. But yeah, no. Once we get to Qatar, I think we then go to, I think it's Mexico or Austin. I think it's Austin, which is always a great one. So we've got a really good run of races, because then we go Mexico, then we go Brazil, then we go Vegas, then we finish with Abu Dhabi. So the end of the season is coming into sight, which will now we'll probably feel glad, because we're fed up of the championship battle this year. But at least Carlos Sainz cheered things up. But I know as soon as the season finishes, we'll both be itching Formula One to return, won't we?
Yeah, well, we'll be doing our usual thing where it will go quiet through January, and then we'll start hearing about car development and release dates for unveiling dates for the cars and stuff, and then we'll get excited again.
And also, when we launch this podcast, we kind of launch it straight after pre-season testing and all these car launches. So, I mean, this is looking quite far into the future now, but I'm really excited to cover that, because I think that would be a really fun period for us to sort of analyse the different car launches every week. So, that's a little teaser for you for the future of Lights Up Podcast in 2024. But with that, that's all from us. All the best, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.